This episode of Food Psych is brought to you by my book, Anti-Diet: Reclaim Your Time, Money, Well-Being, and Happiness Through Intuitive Eating, which is available wherever books are sold. Just go to christyharrison.com/book to order it now. That's christyharrison.com/book. Welcome to Food Psych, a podcast about intuitive eating, health at every size, body liberation, and taking down diet culture. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and I'm an anti-diet registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and author of Anti-Diet. Join me here every week as I interview interesting people from all different backgrounds about their paths toward peace with food and their bodies. And by the way, on this show, we bleep out diet culture stuff like weight and calorie numbers, but we don't censor swear words or other adult language, so listener discretion is advised.
Anti-diet revolution, we're for health at every size. Eat the foods you like. Food Psych.
Hey there, welcome to episode 274 of Food Psych, our penultimate episode before the hiatus. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and today I'm talking with eating psychology coach and body image mentor Lu Uhrich about how a cancer scare and a chronic illness in the family made her fall prey to the wellness diet, how to get your period back if you've lost it, why it's so easy to tumble into disordered eating with just one diet or exercise program, the process of leaving a religion and reimagining your faith, and so much more. I can't wait to share our conversation with you in just a moment. As I shared in episode 270, the podcast is going to go on hiatus starting next week, March 15th, so that I can work on my new book. And I'm really excited about that new book, but it's bittersweet because I'm sad to be leaving you all. And this is actually the last interview episode before we go. So next week's episode will just be a quick solo one where I'll say goodbye for now and let you know how to find me and stay connected. I'm not doing listener Q&As for any of these remaining episodes, but instead, I'm now answering questions every week in my newsletter, Food Psych Weekly. You can subscribe to that at christyharrison.com/newsletter. That's really the best way to stay in touch with me and stay up on what I'm up to in these coming months, because I will not be on social media that much to try to preserve my bandwidth and concentration and attention for the book. But I will be writing that newsletter every week and sharing announcements and messages there as well. So that is christyharrison.com/newsletter. That's where you can subscribe, and you'll get a special bonus Q&A edition right when you do. If you want to ask a question for me to answer in the newsletter, as always, you can go to christyharrison.com/questions, and that will automatically subscribe you to the newsletter as well. Except you won't get the bonus Q&A. So I would definitely go through christyharrison.com/newsletter and then also ask a question. As I've been saying, the podcast archives will continue to be here throughout our hiatus, and I'll be directing you to archival episodes in the newsletter too. So I hope you'll continue to enjoy these soon-to-be 275 episodes we've done so far, and stay subscribed to the podcast so that you'll get lots more episodes whenever we come back with season 9. There is one podcast I'm going to keep doing for the rest of this year and beyond, and that's the one I do every month for my Intuitive Eating Fundamentals course. So if you want to keep getting new audio episodes from me, even while I'm writing this new book, you can come join the course at christyharrison.com/course. There I answer all of our members' questions in that special podcast, and I've been doing it for close to 5 years now. So there's a huge library you can listen to with hundreds of answers I've given to other participants in past episodes. And many people have said that that podcast has helped them work through their own personal sticking points with intuitive eating, and that it feels like getting one-on-one coaching with me. The course also has 13 modules of self-paced audio and written content, teaching you the principles of intuitive eating and helping you not turn intuitive eating into a diet. And there's a private community forum just for course participants so that you can have daily guidance from me and my team and hundreds of other great people who are supporting you on the anti-diet path. That forum, by the way, is on my website, not on Facebook anymore. So you don't have any diet ads or other shiny objects distracting you from the work of connecting and the work of healing your relationship with food. If that all sounds good and you want to learn more, and you're ready to break free from diet culture and reclaim the life it stole from you, come check out the course at christyharrison.com/course. That's christyharrison.com/course. And now, without any further ado, let's go to my conversation with Lu Uhrich. So tell me about your relationship with food growing up.
I had a great relationship with food growing up. I know that's not the norm. In my experience as a practitioner or just in conversations with friends, I realized so many people had complicated backgrounds with food, and I am privileged to not have that. I had a family that we really centered food and a lot of our experiences together. And the one person in my life that I think of so often when I think about my childhood and growing up with food is my grandmother, who lived next door to me growing up and who was just this amazing matriarch of our family. And in so many ways, she instilled in us this idea of food as something that could be medicinal and could serve this purpose towards feeling better if you had a cold. She'd juice and make us. At the time, my brother and sister and I were like, what? We are not going to drink carrot juice. But I since have changed my mind. I love carrot juice, but she would juice things and she would make these silly concoctions that she thought would make us feel better. But she also was this amazing baker. And I live in Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, the home of Pennsylvania Dutch cooking and the Amish. And, this place is known for its butter and bread and dough consumption. And so that was a part of my growing up experience. And my grandmother, who was born and raised here, she would cook the most amazing meals. All of our holiday meals were so memorable because of her. We made a bunch of recipes that were originally hers. She's no longer with us, but they still persist in our family as something so sacred and a part of our tradition. And so I really had this great relationship with food that was marked by her. She's who I think of when I think of my childhood relationship with food, because she looked at food as this beautiful thing that could bring families together, that could create pleasure, that could also nourish and heal. And it was a well-rounded view of food that I know has helped me as I've navigated my relationship with food in the years since.
Yeah. If only everyone could have that, like that peaceful relationship with food to come back to, even if they get pulled away.
Which I did. Yeah.
Sort of like a guiding star. Yeah.
Yeah.
When did that start to happen for you? When did you start to feel pulled away from that peaceful, intuitive relationship with food?
I'll be honest, it did not happen. I mean, I know exactly when it happened, and it didn't happen until my adult life, until after I had gone through, all those times and those seasons where, again, doing the work that I do, I've heard from countless individuals about when their relationship with food became complicated or frustrating. And a lot of those rites of passage, I really just sailed through. So puberty and getting my period and having a changing body, my relationship with food stayed great. And then going to college and this idea around the freshman or whatever that ridiculous idea is, and going through, changing my living situation and having a cafeteria 24/7 to be, accessible and having any food that I could desire would really be there. And having that experience, my relationship with food still stayed so, I want to just almost say like pure and uncomplicated. And then I got engaged and married and did all the wedding dress shopping and going through that experience, those experiences as well. I got pregnant and adopted children. And so I became a mother, and still my relationship with food was intact despite the changes in my body that happened naturally as a part of those rites of passage and all of the voices that were wanting to have opinions or wanting to, I shouldn't say wanting, because I think there are so many people out there who don't even know that they are participating in diet culture and in the destruction of people's relationship with food when they're saying the things they think they should say about, again, let's say fitting into a wedding dress or being careful what you eat when you move away to college. Those sort of people think they're doing you right. They're trying to instill health in you. And I say that in quotes. They're trying to help you be safe and protect you. But really, those are the damaging little comments that, when said over and over again, start to erode an otherwise healthy relationship with food. And I navigated all of that, having my relationship with food still protected, I think, because of my childhood experiences with seeing it as multifaceted and beautiful and connecting. But eventually, what really tipped me over the edge, and I say this in retrospect because at the time I wouldn't have been able to put words to it, but we went through some pretty serious medical crises when we were a young family. So at the time, it was me, my husband, and our 2 daughters. My son had not been born yet. And my husband, well, they thought my husband had pancreatic cancer, and that's a big deal. And so we were going to the best of the best. We were traveling to Johns Hopkins and getting him checked out because he was so young to have a mass on his pancreas. And at the same time, our daughter, who has pretty profound special needs, was experiencing epilepsy and other physical effects of a chromosomal deletion. And so we were navigating her health conditions. We were navigating his health conditions. I was definitely in the, I'm going to be a 20-something, widow with kids and another one on the way, because we were patiently waiting to adopt our son at the time. And I really wanted something to control. And of course, when people are navigating health crises, what do the do-gooders suggest? But diets and exercise. So my husband was being told, well, maybe you could try this, or, hey, why don't you think about that? And he was getting diet advice and people were offering their 2 cents. And we were desperate, of course, for him to be well and for our family to survive. And so we entered into a 3-month popular health program, I'll say, quote, and again in quotes, right? They say it's a health program. It was not. It was a horrible, the opposite of health, destructive program that was abusive and led me to an eating disorder, really. So I had, again, someone who came from a lifelong positive relationship with food and their body. In this moment of crisis for our family, I really wanted something to control. Why not control exercise? Why not count, control, and tabulate every calorie that's going into my body, macronutrient, micronutrient? It's really good at Excel spreadsheets because I was a CPA, so as an accountant. And so this all just came really naturally. I just do the math. It's data. I can do this. And it was something to control. But in doing so, I did lose weight. I lost my period, my mental and emotional health and stability. My thyroid health tanked. There are a lot of things I lost in that experience for 3 months of what I thought was going to be control, and having something that I could rely on in a world and in a season in my life where I felt like there wasn't really much of that. And so that's what led to my disordered relationship with food, was a 3-month workout program.
I mean, it sounds like you were so vulnerable because of everything that was going on in your family, but also how, just profound that is to see that someone who had made it through all these life milestones that often bring up disordered eating and disordered relationships with food for people, you had made it through all that, run the gauntlet. And then you got to this place and it still caught you. Diet culture still got its hooks in you.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've seen it in your practice, and I've seen it in mine, where I am not the only case of that. And I almost feel as though, I don't like to make these sweeping statements, but there is definitely a large group of individuals who would have a similar experience, who kind of came into this disordered eating later in life as a result of one diet, one exercise program. And it's really hard to admit that it's led to an eating disorder, or that it was that one thing that tipped the scales. Most people have a hard time admitting that. And so they try and try and try to get on top of it themselves, and to no avail, because that's really all it takes. It's truly all it takes is to go down the path of one restrictive, eating program, one over-exercise experiment, and find yourself having this energy imbalance that you're having trouble getting back to homeostasis or normalcy, whatever that looks like for you or looked like for you before you started it. And you're just thinking, oh, if I can just do this one more thing, like I'll be okay. I'm not like this person who grew up having a disordered relationship with food, or I'm not like my friend who has had this experience. I just went on one diet, but that's all it takes for some people.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think it's so telling how many people do go through that. And I think back to like the Minnesota starvation experiment. I feel like that's such a lot of people who are dieters and maybe eventually become chronic dieters and, engage in disordered eating and eating disorders. It often does start with that one experience of deprivation, that one experience of, like you said, energy deficit, where it's like your body is experiencing starvation or quote unquote semi-starvation, as they said in that experiment, right? It doesn't even have to be like you're totally without food. You're just eating less than your body needs. And that kicks off such a profound cascade of biological and psychological sequelae, whatever, right? Like consequences in your body that can lead to this extremely, extremely disordered relationship with food. And yeah, I think it catches people by surprise when they're older and that happens, because they think, well, I'm not that type of person, right? Like I avoided this my whole life. So that's not what's happening for me. I'm just lacking in willpower, or I just need to do a different diet, or I need to try harder or something. It's harder to recognize it as disorder in that case, I think.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up this idea of someone thinking like, I'm not that type of person, because I think what it proves is there is no type of person who can experience disordered eating or an eating disorder. That it's not about that. I mean, honestly, it's our bodies working as designed to react in that way, in terms of like all of the psychobiological consequences of semi-starvation, like you brought up from the Minnesota starvation experiment, or like I experienced in my own 3 months, just 3 months of trying a popular program with all of its, before and afters and positive spin. It was really so destructive to me. And it just took that one time, because there is no type of person or type of environment or situation that breeds disordered eating and eating disorders that we aren't all living in because of the environment and the culture that we're in.
Yeah, that's so well said. There is no type of person who gets an eating disorder. But that's what's sold to us, right? That's what I think we're conditioned to believe. It's like, oh, that's for those people over there. That's, for like thin white adolescent girls. That's not for me if I'm an adult woman, or if I'm a larger bodied person, or whatever it might be. It's like, I think there's ways in which our culture's stereotypes about who gets eating disorders really serves to prop up diet culture, because it, says like, oh, it's such a tiny percentage of people and it's only this group over here. Don't look within. Don't think about what you're doing as potentially disordered because it doesn't fit this profile. Meanwhile, there's so many different ways for disordered eating to show up, and for so many different types of people who have that experience. It just might not be the stereotypical experience that we're told.
Right. And for me, in the experience that I had, I will say I detest the BMI. And so I say this just to give perspective to people who might be using this to calm their maybe fears or wonder if they might be experiencing disordered eating. So I share this saying BMI is garbage, but for sake of understanding kind of where I was at, I was in a quote unquote normal BMI when I started this program. I was just at the other end of a quote unquote normal BMI when I finished it. And that's all it took for my thyroid, my hormones, my reproductive health to totally tank. So there isn't this idea of like, well, I wasn't thin enough, or eating disorders are only for people who are in smaller bodies or who lose this much weight or have this drastic of a change. For me, that was not the case. And I still had all of the consequences of undereating, overexerting, and stressing myself about the size of my body.
That's so important to name. And I've had the same experience. Also was always in a quote unquote normal BMI range. And, we're both people with relatively thin privilege, right? Where we haven't been subject to the fat phobia of someone who's living at the higher end of the BMI spectrum. And that is really extreme, having to go through that. But there are people out there who have significant disordered eating and like the effects of starvation, where also, hormonal difficulties, losing periods, things like that, where they're actually at the high end of the BMI spectrum, where they're actually in the, the quote unquote O categories, even though they haven't lost quote unquote enough weight to be considered stereotypically like eating disordered or whatever. They might still be in that high BMI category, but have lost enough weight for their body to feel that it's in a starvation state and to kick off, because there's size diversity out there and people are meant to be at all different points on the BMI spectrum, which is why BMI is bullshit.
Yeah.
As you said, right? But yeah, it's so mind-boggling to me how, even though now the DSM-5, which back when I was in my disordered eating days, it was the DSM-4 and didn't really recognize disordered eating in the same way as it does now, where it recognizes now that people can have anorexia and not be at a, quote unquote underweight. It doesn't have certain BMI categories, but still, I think there are so many mental health professionals and dietitians and doctors and other medical professionals out there who think of eating disorders as only affecting people who are quote unquote underweight. And there's just this pervasive stereotype that persists even beyond diagnostic changes, so that, even professionals don't take it seriously sometimes when a person who was larger bodied or thin but not in that quote unquote underweight category is presenting with all of these consequences of disordered eating.
Right. And that was my experience. I remember, I will never forget being told that when I went to get help, because I hadn't had a period for what ended up being 2.5 years, but I went in between there to go and get help to try to see what was happening with my body. And I remember a doctor looking me in the eye and saying, because I brought up could this be hypothalamic amenorrhea? Like, is this what's happening to my body? And the doctor looking at me and going, no, we usually see that in ballerinas and distance runners, really thin people. And I was like, I am a thin person. So imagine then someone in a body larger than mine, or like you said, in any of the O categories, according to the BMI scale, and how much pushback they might receive from suggesting that or from asking for the help that they need.
Oh, it's so horrifying, the type of dismissal that people get for these types of conditions. And yeah, the stereotyping that happens. Ballerinas and distance runners. Like, what is that? It's so infuriating. So what did that do then to your desire to recover or your understanding of what was going on with you when you heard that?
I mean, I'm a pretty stubborn person. And as much as this season in my life, I know you talk about dieting as being like this life thief. And that was really my experience. I lost so much of myself and who I was, but I didn't lose my grit. And so for me, I wasn't taking no as an answer because I knew something was amiss. Like I had my period since I was 11 years old, and after a couple years, it became very regular and very reliable. And I just knew something was wrong. And I had gone through a lot of people will often be immediately referred to their OBGYN, who will put them on progesterone to try to induce a period, which that happened. They did that to me. It did not work, obviously, because I was malnourished and I was experiencing an energy imbalance that wasn't going to be fixed by pumping my body with progesterone. But that created a lot of negative side effects for me psychologically and physically. And so I just knew I needed help. I needed somebody to actually listen to me and hear what I was saying and use all of their education for my benefit, which I was paying them for. And so I did finally find an endocrinologist who was willing to listen to me. And he's a great guy. I know him today personally because our kids have gone to school together now. And I am always so thankful for him because he did listen to me. And despite not actually having seen my same experience in somebody who wasn't quote unquote underweight, he was willing to listen and believe the things I was saying to him and talk to other people, colleagues, and people he respected to get more information, to try out a few things, to figure out what was going on with me. So my persistence just led me to be like, well, if you're not going to help me, I'll go to someone else. But that's privilege, first of all, that I had the health coverage and the access to be able to do that. It's privilege also because I'm not used to people pushing aside my medical concerns because I'm in a body that most people will trust as knowing what I'm saying or having more connection with my body, which is ridiculous. But I do think because of that, having had those experiences all my life of feeling like people trusted me to know my body, to take care of my body, and to fight for it, that I was listened to more so than potentially someone else who had a different experience, who didn't have as much access or time or money in that same experience. It could have gone quite differently.
And even the background, like Reagan Chastain calls it personality privilege, I think, where it's like, how you were raised or whatever sort of combination of factors lead you to have that personality of the grit and the stubbornness and the
self-advocacy.
Yeah, the willingness to speak up. Totally. I think not everyone has that, and not everyone has that at certain times in their life too. Like I think if have been beaten down by the healthcare system for a long time, you might not be in the place to advocate for yourself, but it's possible to have recovery with that too, where you do come into a place where you're feeling more able to speak up, and just kind of depends on where you're at.
Exactly.
I'm curious what happened from there, because it sounds like there's a very strong part of you that wanted recovery and help and knew that if you knew enough to ask about hypothalamic amenorrhea, maybe there was some awareness that you weren't eating enough and that you were overexercising and that was contributing to the problem. So was there another part of you, though, that was still holding on to those behaviors, that was reluctant to give those up? And how did that kind of play out?
Oh, totally. And I mean, this came probably a year into my experience. So while the program that I participated in was only 3 months, after I started having symptoms of thyroid dysregulation and hormonal imbalances, I still persisted in like, well, now that I've lost this weight and now that I know that I can have and now that I know, whatever the things were that I thought meant something or signified success in that program, I should always have it. And so I definitely for about a year persisted in trying to continue that, again, in quotes, nutrition guide from the program and trying to continue the level of exercise and exertion that was a part of it as well, and just suffering through it and having really frustrating symptoms, not being able to sleep at night and having night sweats and getting intermittent fevers and losing hair and having weak nails, but definitely the moods and the mental state that I was in, which I attributed a lot to the hormones that also are related to my period and not having a period, were noticeable. And so I eventually knew I wanted to take care of that. But if you would have asked me at the time, can we take care of you getting your period back? And then let's just stay in this body state, I would have been like, yes, that's what I want to do. Even though that wasn't actually ever going to help me and was nothing to go after in the first place. So at the time, once I finally met with a doctor who actually said, yeah, there's something going on here. I want to help you. I'll be by your side. I worked with him for about a year, working on getting my period back. And also I ended up hiring a coach to help me in terms of dismantling the diet mentality and the restrictive eating and the overexercise that I was doing. And I think those two things went hand in hand. I'm always thankful for the medical professionals that were in my life at the time who actually were steering me in the direction of healing and recovery. But I do think that I needed the support and the emotional sidekick, I'll say, of a coach by my side to really help me navigate why I was engaging with food the way I was and why I was engaging with exercise the way I was and why I felt so connected then to a particular body and particular outcomes physically and what that meant for me, and really uncovering where it was all bullshit and reconnecting with my body. That was something that a doctor wasn't going to give me. I needed to find that with a different sort of support, and I found that in a coach.
How did you know to look for that? Did you try it on your own and sort of it wasn't
Oh, yeah.
working? Yeah.
Oh, I tried it on my own for a really long time. I tried all the things. I read the blog posts. So I would find coaches and see people that were talking about these things. And to even say, like, because I know you said, well, it seems like there was a part of you who wanted to get better because you even knew to bring up like hypothalamic amenorrhea and ask about that. Well, I just Googled it. I am a type A, information driven. If anyone's into the Enneagram, an Enneagram 5 through and through. So the more information I have, the better. And this is just a part of my personality. Apparently, I've been this way ever since I was young. I like to know. I'll ask questions and investigate everything to death. And so I did investigate my own symptoms to death. And I did try to figure out what was going on. And you look up missing period, and you're going to see HA show up in your Google feed. And so I saw that and I was like, oh, this might actually make sense given the things that I had experienced and the fact that I had never done an exercise program before. I moved my body. I had even run a half marathon prior to any of my disordered experience with exercise and with food, but it was all from this very natural place of listening to my body, being connected to it. I never once dieted or counted a single calorie or controlled my food in any way before all of that. So once I read about HA and recognized the things that I had done in this 3-month program, I was like, okay, this could actually be what's going on here. But I did, there was this level of denial, even in me. Like I criticized the medical professionals for going, well, you're not thin enough to have had this experience. But even in me, I thought the same thing. And I think I wanted to think the same thing because it would allow me to continue on this disordered path that I was on in terms of controlling the food in my body. But yeah, there was a part of me that had to investigate, had to know that information-driven side of me. And so I did want to seek answers. And so same thing, once I started going through all the blog posts and trying to engage in the behaviors and the suggestions for recovery and healing, and finding that I kept bumping up against diet mentality and my own fat phobia and wanting to be thinner and thinner and more chiseled and more quote unquote toned and have the right body, that I just was like, I actually can't do this on my own. And I called a lot of people. I called several professionals in different areas and different helping professions, but there was a coach that I really connected with the most. And so I just went for it. And I will say too, another privilege, something else that I really had as a benefit was my husband, who did not have pancreatic cancer, by the way, but had an autoimmune condition that mimics cancer in the body and creates like tumor-like masses. He was very much like, you need help, and I'm willing to do anything to help you in that. So while I may not have made the investment in coaching myself, if it was up to me, he was very much like, we're doing this. You like, I'm willing to pull out any stop possible for you to get the help that you need. And not everyone has that support. And not everyone has that person in their corner when they themselves aren't in their corner, really. And I wasn't in mine, but he was in mine. And so I would credit him also with helping me get to the place of actually finding help and utilizing it.
That is so lucky, especially because he was the one with the health condition that, I could imagine him being also very caught up in the stuff, right? Like the diety, exercisey stuff. And it sounds like he wasn't, or at least was enough away from it to see the disorder and how you were relating to it.
Yeah, well, it ended up, and like I said, it was an autoimmune condition that was mimicking cancer. And so it didn't really like him over exercising or under eating either. And so he had his own negative outcomes as a result of trying to pursue quote unquote health in his own right, and really exacerbated his condition, and which was helpful in discovering what it actually was, but harmful in his own experience as well. But yeah, I mean, without him, I think it would have taken me longer to get the help that I needed.
Oh, that's so lucky that he was there. How did you relate to your kids in all of this? And how did they relate to you or see you relating to food in your body? Like, did that have an impact on the way that they were feeling about food in their own bodies?
I am so grateful to say that I don't think so. And I don't think so because it just so happened to be the ages that they were at. Had it happened any other stage in their life, I could see it affecting them on a more like direct level where they were seeing my experience with food and internalizing that experience, that for themselves and the way they related to food. That is not what happened. But I will say, going back to this idea of dieting being a life thief, that the one thing that I will always regret is the way that I expressed motherhood in those years, because I was detached. I was so consumed with what I was eating and filling out my Excel spreadsheet and counting macro and micronutrients and weighing myself and being caught up in the way that I looked or what I fit into and could I fit in a workout, that I was irritable and distant and detached from my kids in a season where we already were detached and a little bit distant just by way of having to travel to medical facilities and being my husband's medical advocate and showing up for him and my one daughter's advocate and showing up for her. We were already very much in this, I want to say like sterile or just very compartmentalized life because of the season we were in. And I only made that worse by diving deep into dieting and disordered eating and overexercise. And that's my biggest regret of that time, is how detached it made me from my husband and also from my kids.
Yeah, it is such a life thief in that way, right? The relationships, the ability to be present in relationships. I think that's something I've experienced too. And I know so many people who've experienced that as well. It's profoundly disconnecting and alienating to be obsessing about food so much. And like the spreadsheet is such a powerful example of that, but I think happens with any way that you're kind of calculating and, thinking and obsessing about food, whether it's apps or recipe books or whatever it is that you sort of have your head in and not present with the people in your life.
Right. Yeah, totally. And if anything, I mean, my kids saw me binge more than they heard or saw my restriction. But I don't know that I think they were so young that it wasn't something they were noticing as like rabid and out of control.
That is lucky. I'm curious how it unfolded from there then. Like once you started getting help, what was the path like?
Once I started getting help, I learned a lot about myself. So this is when that retrospect comes in where I started going, oh yeah, now I understand like why I gravitated towards this and what the immediate benefits were to me that, ultimately ended up being harmful and destructive, but at the time felt soothing or as a way for me to cope with a lot of unknowns in my personal life. Once I started navigating that, I realized a lot about myself. Like I'm somebody who refuses to ask for help. I still struggle with that today, but I'm much better at it. So it was great. I really am so grateful for the coach that I had because she challenged me to ask for help when I knew I needed it, but didn't want to appear needy. And so I knew things like needing to ask for help, relaxing into the uncertainty that is life, and not necessarily trusting that everything was going to be okay, because if this year has taught us anything, everything's not okay, but trusting that I could navigate it, that there would be people in my life, partners, that my own self and commitment to my well-being and commitment to caring for those around me could get me through, and that we would make it, we would survive, and life would go on. And despite changes that might happen, whether they were perceived as negative or positive, that I could keep going. I think knowing that and just really letting go of this desire to control and tabulate and count was super helpful. Like there are no more spreadsheets in maybe for like my bank account, there's a spreadsheet, but in general, I hold a lot of things more loosely now than I did. And she taught me to do that. But aside from that, it was really just understanding the way the body works. And that's, I would say, the most pivotal experience I had in healing my relationship with food and body was, again, me being somebody who loves information, loves to research. I really dove into how the body works and why does it respond to energy deficits by making your period disappear or lowering your thyroid hormones or changing your body temperature. Like I wanted to know all of those things, which actually led to me really connecting to my body in this way that said, you've had my back all along. Like you are here for me. You're doing all of these things. You're lowering your energy output in these other areas to keep me alive. The body knows what it's doing. For me, gathering lots of information about the body and how it worked. Things like researching the Minnesota starvation experiment and understanding the outcomes for the men that were involved in that. It all really led to me having this greater respect for my body, which ultimately led for me befriending it and partnering with it instead of looking at it like an adversary or something to control. And that by way of trusting my body, I eased back into that very carefree relationship that I once had with food, growing up and into my early 20s.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And I think I don't know what my Enneagram is, but it sounds like similar in a way to you, where like information is power. And I love to like just know about things, and that helps me to make decisions, and it helps me to be my own advocate, and also was really helpful in my recovery, like researching and learning about things like that, like the Minnesota starvation experiment, the physiology of starvation and of nutrition. It's part of what drove me to go back to school and, become a dietitian, was this like desire to heal myself, and partly a desire to like master weight loss, but also partly a desire to know what was going on in my relationship with food and heal that. And yeah, I think that can be so useful and important. In a way, that's part of why I do this podcast, is to like give people that information that they can use towards healing. Not that it's always enough, or that you don't need coaches and other supports. And sometimes, as I did, like a lot of therapy too, to heal the underlying issues, not just the food stuff, but also like some of the just lack of self-compassion in general that I had. I think it's really important to have that information and to know that what diet culture tells us is going to make us well or whole or quote unquote healthy is not actually true, and counter to what our bodies really want.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a sign. It sounds so counterintuitive, but it is a sign of a healthy body when it breaks down as a result of us undereating and overexercising. Like that, it seems so counterintuitive to be like, what? This is my body like being mean to me or not complying. And it's like, no, this is your body trying to save you. Like this is exactly what it was built to do, is if you're starving or if your energy is depleted or there's an imbalance there, it's designed to pull out every single stop, to shut things down that are unnecessary to your basic survival in order for you to live. And figuring that out was the most pivotal thing to me. But it is so counterintuitive because we are all so steeped in diet culture at every turn.
And I think when you're sort of in the thick of it with diet culture, there's this sense of like, I don't want that. Like my body is, I'm frustrated with my body and I should be able to control it. Like I remember when I was probably at the worst of my eating disorder, or, somewhere in that general area, as opposed to like the lighter disorder that I had later. I was enrolled in a study. It was like an eating disorder prevention and treatment study. And it was, they gave us all this information about like how often we need to eat and how, restricting drives binging and how bodies work, and the fact that a lot of these consequences we experience are a natural response to starvation. And I remember learning that and not feeling like empowered or using that towards self-care, but using that as like more evidence that my body was just trying to steer me wrong, and that like I needed to somehow exert more willpower, more mental energy to like outsmart my body, because my body was doing these things that were so counter to what I wanted. And I look back at that now and I'm like, God, like my mindset was so, that's not who I am to like think like that. I'm not someone who is, there are people who sort of grow up in these like punitive communities that are all about quote unquote discipline. And I'm thinking too about, I don't know if you've seen The Vow, HBO's docuseries about the Nexium cult. I just watched that recently.
I didn't see The Vow, but I've definitely deep dove into all of the podcasts about it.
Yeah, it's horrifying. Like that cult was horrifying, and like the way that it broke people down. And there's so much crossover too with disordered eating. It's fascinating. Like his sort of sexual abuse of people involved starving them and getting them to be in this like weakened state mentally and emotionally, partly through starvation. But also like there was this sort of constant rhetoric around like discipline and like mastery over the body, and that we shouldn't be like allowing our bodies or whatever to dictate, or our desires to dictate, that we need to like clamp down on them or sort of master ourselves in some way. And that's, this like old school sort of religious rhetoric that I think has shaped a lot of Western culture, especially American culture, the puritanical idea of like discipline over the body and that being sort of the most holy and the most spiritually enlightened or something like that. And I didn't grow up with that. Like I didn't grow up with religion. I had my family was dysfunctional in a lot of ways, but there was not that sort of cult-like disciplinary, this idea of having to discipline oneself by engaging in really abstemious and draconian behaviors and stuff. So that's not who I've ever been. That has never really appealed to me. And yet I was there. Like I was doing that to myself. I was in this place of such brainwashing from my participation in diet culture, and also I think just from the starvation, that my brain started to work in those ways, that I started to, and I also was susceptible to people in my life who thought like that at the time too, or I sort of gravitated towards one relationship in particular with someone who was kind of had those beliefs and was pretty toxic for me. And I think about that too as an aspect of life theft, like that my personality and my value system and my beliefs about the world and sort of what was right and what was moral or good were totally compromised by the disordered eating and by diet culture.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting that you bring this up, because not something I had planned to talk about, but something that I will, is that my deconstructing diet culture went hand in hand with me deconstructing my faith. And prior to the deconstruction of both, I will tell you that I definitely had, through the influences and the groups that we were a part of, I bought into this idea that there must be like something like evil within me or demonic that wouldn't let me just not binge and have a quote unquote normal relationship with food, even though at the time normal was defined to me in that season as like restricting and overworking. But I thought there must be something horribly wrong with me, and that there must be like, to the point where like I really thought, okay, well maybe like I was grasping at straws because as is often the case, we restrict long enough and we will binge because our bodies are trying again to take care of us and to nourish us and give us the energy we need to live and survive. And so after several months of binging, I was like, there's something evil living within my body, to the point where I started reading books and, again, information overload, trying to learn about what could possibly be overtaking me, that I threw out family heirlooms, threw them into a river thinking they might be attached to something evil that is causing me to binge, when really the only thing that was causing me to binge was the fact that I was malnourished. But yeah, it went hand in hand with this very destructive faith and belief system that I had been a part of. And so I actually deconstructed both at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been intense.
It was a little intense, but it feels really good now, like it feels really good now. And what I have found, so if anyone who's listening has been through, anything, I think a faith deconstruction, a dissolution of an important relationship, so estrangement from family estrangement or divorce or anything like that, if you have gone through that and come out the other side, then you know that it feels horrible and feels like there is no other side and there is no way out and you're stuck in it forever, until you do start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and creating this new life and this new vision for yourself. And it's possible. And often I find with my clients who have gone through something like that, that it's easier for them to believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel of their disordered eating than for those who are experiencing this as their first glimpse of, of having a belief system or a relationship or something totally dissolve and turn upside down on its head. And that doesn't mean it's impossible if it's your first, but if it is your first, what I often tell my clients is this will inform future experiences you'll have. And you'll always know that you can make it through and that things can change for the better because of what you endure here in this recovery and in this healing process. But for those of us who have had a different healing process of another kind, or have changed our relationships or our belief systems in another way, it really is a great informant to how we can navigate through healing our relationship with food and our body.
That is so profound. I think about the people I know who are in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction or who've gone through, a crisis of faith and a deconstruction, as you say. I think that those folks, and I think about the ones that I've worked with who've sort of allowed that to inform their healing, it has been such a gift. It has been such an asset to sort of think of it in that way. Because I think it does prove, it shows that you can do hard things.
We're resilient.
Yeah, so resilient. And that it's something that might seem so fundamental or like a given, like your relationship with food, your relationship with alcohol, your relationship with your faith, whatever it is, your belief system, it seems, I think it's just like the water we're swimming in before we start to become aware and deconstruct it. But even when something seems so fundamental and there's no possible other way, there is, and you can get to the other side of it. And people do it all the time. We're amazing humans.
Yeah, truly. And so some of those, what we would say are the hardest or worst experiences of our life become the most encouraging and supportive when we're facing something similar in the future. But yeah. I mean, I basically just deconstructed everything all at the same time.
Yeah, that's a big moment. How did that play into your relationship? Because I know it sounds like you were married already at the time. So was your husband going through that with you, or how did that play out?
Yeah, good question. So we were both going through a faith deconstruction at the same time, which is another privilege. Not everyone has that experience. My husband and I, we met when we were 18 and got married in our early 20s. So we're going to be married 16 years this July. So we'd gone through a lot of things prior to this, prior to his health concern, prior to deconstructing our faith, and had really developed this great dynamic relationship. We were really on the same team. And so that was wonderful because we were a support to each other in that. And then I will say that me going through recovery and healing my relationship with food and my body led to him healing a lot of things in his relationship with food and his body that he'd experienced since childhood. He was always, the boy in the larger body, and he'll talk about his memories of having to wear husky sized clothes and how that made him feel, and his family's relationship with food and how that affected his relationship with food and his body. And it was really healing for him, for me to heal from disordered eating as well, I think. And so, yeah, we kind of navigated both together.
That's amazing. And so powerful to have a supportive person like that. Because, sometimes it doesn't always line up that both people are going through it at the same time. So it's a nice gift that you both had each other to do that.
Yeah.
So how did you get to coaching then? Was it sort of a natural progression of this helped me so much, now I want to do this for other people?
Yeah, I would say that's really what it was, is recognizing that I was not alone. I think it was so important to recognize I was not alone. There are so many people going through this. And again, kind of just stumble into disordered eating the way that I did. And realizing what it had taken from me and from my life and my connection to friends or family or my children and to my sense of self, and going, wow, how many people that I'm engaging with on a day-to-day basis are actually experiencing this. And then once I started talking about it, I realized there was quite a few. And saying you're in that place of healing and going, wow, the veil has been lifted. I see what I didn't see before. And now I want to make sure everyone can see it too. And so I do think there was that side of it in me that just was I've been helped. I want to pass it on and help other people. And I've also always been somebody who is very vocal and very involved in social justice. And to me, I could not separate my experiences from the social justice side of, being anti-diet and understanding and advocating for body diversity and health at every size. And so, I just wanted to be a part of that movement, a part of helping just one person. That was just my idea, like my thoughts were, if I could just help one person or partner with one person as they navigate this, and they then partner with someone else, like how wonderful would it be? But again, being somebody who's very much like information driven, I wanted to make sure that I learned as much as I could first. So I mentored with professionals who are already working in those arenas. I was certified in mind, body, nutrition, and eating psychology, and took from that what I found valuable and left quite a few things as well. And then just really said, hey, I'm going to do this in whatever capacity I can, and went for it. And now I'm 6 years doing this work full time, and I love it.
That's so awesome. It is so rewarding to do this work. I think to sort of use that information that you have from your own experience to help other people on their path is very, very healing. I think it sort of solidifies the process in a way. For me, it has anyway. And I know for a lot of people I've talked with about it, it's like paying it forward and closing the loop in a way on the healing process.
Yeah, totally. And I'm always really honest about the fact that, look, I'm not a licensed therapist. I am not a licensed counselor. I am a certified coach. There's a difference there. It certainly serves a purpose. It served a purpose in my healing and recovery. I've seen my work and the work of other colleagues serve purpose in so many people's lives. But kind of just knowing my space and my gifts and what I'm good at in this arena, and making sure that I'm always pointing people towards other resources and those voices or professionals who are best equipped to work with them. Because I don't work with everyone. I'm very candid about that. If I think, hey, you know what, there's actually probably, I think working with a registered dietitian or, a therapist would be the best bet for you. I'm super candid about that, because I think that it's so important to be who we are and say who we are in this work, because there's a lot of really great coaches and practitioners and professionals. And there's certainly people who aren't, or who still are very caught up in some facet or another of diet culture or fat phobia. And that's not helpful at all to, partnering with people as they heal their relationship with food and their body.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And it's refreshing to hear you sort of own that, because I think a lot of people are scared to sort of say no or say that something isn't a fit. Professionals want to help everyone and don't necessarily want to turn anyone away. But I think it is really such an important thing to recognize, like when you're going to be of use to someone or of benefit, right, of service to them, versus maybe when someone else will be a better fit and of more service.
Yeah.
And I know one of your specialties is period recovery. You know so much about that from the research you did of your own. I'm curious how you work with your clients on that. What are some tools and recommendations that you give them, and what do you maybe also refer out to other professionals?
Yeah, I really love the period recovery side, because there's like this tangible end game, right? When it comes to healing your relationship with food and your body, in terms of where your weight settles at its set point, in terms of what foods really become a pretty regular part of your intake. Those are all just, so first of all, they're changing because we're living, growing organic beings, but also it's just wide open. But if someone's missing a period, when they get a period, it's this really beautiful sign of like your body is reconnecting with you. It's trusting you again. It's telling you that things are looking up. We're getting safer. We're getting back into energy balance. Like this is a really wonderful, tangible message from the body that we're in this together. And I'm liking what you're doing. And so it is an exciting thing to work with women who are looking to regain their periods and seeing it actually happen. But it's, again, one of those things, as much as I said, yeah, there's like a specific outcome, it's very much still some people I work with, it takes 2 months or 3 months, other people 6, some people 2 years. So we're done working together in the capacity of my one-to-one mentorship, which I work with with people for 6 months at a time. We might be done working together, and then a year later, I'm getting a text message or an email saying, "Oh my goodness, it finally came. I just kept living like in this place of being devoted to my food freedom and friendship with my body. And it eventually came back, So there's still no specific time a period comes back. It really is up to each individual body and each individual's experience because, yeah, we've got so many inputs. It's not just our food. It's not just our movement. It's our environment, our stress level, our family situation, there's just a lot to it. But in general, when I work with people who want to regain their period, the first thing I'm advising is just taking it to the simplest place, which is eat more, move less. And that's super scary for a lot of people who have been taught the other way around, right? And so we start with saying, okay, how can we incorporate eating more, moving less? Because what usually happens when people come to me, and I cannot diagnose hypothalamic amenorrhea or HA. I am not, again, I know I'm not a lot of things, and I am not a doctor, and I do not have a medical license. And so I'm very clear in saying, like, yes, please consult your doctors, find somebody that you trust. I will be here with you to support you. I'm happy to correspond with your medical professionals if they have questions about this. Like, I will do and be there for you and advocate for you. And also, I am not the medical professional. So I say this if someone comes to me without a period, I'm not going to diagnose them with HA, but I will say it's quite likely based on the things that you're sharing with me about the way you're eating and moving and experiencing life in your body that you very well might have it. And so then if they want to, I will partner with them in seeing how the two of us can work towards recovering it. And it's up to them how they approach the medical side of it and who they bring in terms of the professionals in their life and that side of it. But I'm very much like eat more, move less, because if you think about dieting, the whole point of a diet is an energy deficit. And the whole reason people get HA is because of an energy imbalance, which leads to hormone dysregulation. And so, because people would say, well, a diet's about a calorie deficit, but calories are just energy. So the whole purpose of a diet is to deplete our energy. And when a body is depleted of energy for any amount of time, which is different for every individual, but whenever that particular body no longer feels safe, it's going to stop performing some of the more secondary duties. So we don't actually have to get periods, and we don't have to, prepare wombs for pregnancy. We don't have to keep our body temperature at exactly a certain place. There is wiggle room there. The changes in our hair and our nails and all of those things can be a result of the body saying, look, we're just going to conserve energy where we can. And we're shutting down because you're not listening to us. And this is also when the body will also kind of quiet down about hunger. And the stomach's not going to growl and the body's not going to pull out all the stops and the signals and like make a big ruckus if you're just not going to feed it. If it's going to do it a number of times until it realizes you're not listening. And then it's going to say, well, we're not going to waste energy on that either. And so the body just slowly shuts down some of these more secondary experiences and functions. And so that's usually what's happening with HA. And so in order to get that back, we've got to start showing up for the body again and again and again. And that looks like minimizing the energy outputs and increasing the energy input. So eating more, moving less, minimizing stress, and exercise is in and of itself a stressor. Yes, can it be a positive one? Absolutely. But in the case of disordered eating and exercise, quite often it is not. And just the general stress we have around weighing ourselves and looking at our bodies and sizing ourselves up and comparing, all of that kind of lends itself to this stress state, the sympathetic nervous system response that it's going to ultimately lead to things like hypothalamic amenorrhea. And so when I work with clients, I'm wanting them to minimize their stress and increase their pleasure and their nourishment and their rest. And over the course of time, doing those things through incorporating things like intuitive eating, intuitive movement, eventually, not always right away, and self-compassion, that really breeds that healing that leads to the body coming back into more of an energy balance.
I love how you explain that so simply. I think that is really powerful and hard for people to get their mind around, of course. And there's certainly support that's needed for eating more and moving less, right? In this society that is so fixated on the opposite. But yeah, it is that simple, really. That, and not that simple in the sense that it's a magic bullet, that it's going to be just flipping a switch. And I think too, people need to know, like you said, it can take years, and it can be after you've been practicing nourishing yourself enough and not over-exercising for a long time that it finally comes back online. So it's not a sign that it's not working, that like eating more and moving less is not working if you don't have your period. It's just that you need to do it more and consistently.
Absolutely. I use this analogy quite often with my clients when we're talking about this because it's just easier to understand. I often talk about your body as being a friend because we don't always love like everything about our friends, right? But we love them and we're committed to a relationship with them. And it's the same with the body. I'm never going to expect my clients to like love everything about their bodies and like think that they walk on water or, no, it's just, are you committed to a relationship with it? And hopefully you are, because it's the only one you have, at least that we know of. So yeah, but so when I talk about getting your period back or even getting your hunger cues back and regaining that body communication, I'll often say it's sort of like if you've had a friend that you've ghosted, like you're getting along and everything was fine. And then they reached out and you just ignored them or you were too busy. And then they reached out again. And eventually they're going to stop reaching out. They're going to shut down. They're going to take the hint. They're going to realize this isn't working for whatever reason. And they're going to move away from you in terms of their contact, communication, and connection. And so then if you want to rekindle that relationship, it's you. You're going to be the person who has to reach out. You're kind of going to have to prove yourself. You're going to have to show up again and again. And they might not actually believe you at first. And it might take several calls or texts or opportunities before they actually accept what you're approaching them with. But it's on you to put that foot forward again and again and again in order to rekindle that relationship. And that's sort of the way it is with our bodies when we're regaining our periods or regaining our hunger and fullness cues and things like that. It's hard. It's very hard. And that's why support is so crucial. But it is our responsibility to put ourselves out there again and again and again and show our bodies, I am going to feed you. I am going to listen to you. I am going to let you rest. I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to ignore your cues. We have to be the ones who show up because we all know what it feels like to be ghosted or ignored by someone. And you get kind of callous and you kind of step back and you let them prove themselves. And in a way, that's sort of what happens with the dynamics of the body in terms of responding and trusting you to be there for it in the ways that are necessary with rest and food and energy and care. And so, yeah, I'll usually explain it with that little analogy because it helps. It helps people to understand, like, yes, even when my body is not responding or I'm not getting my period as quickly as I'd like to, or I'm still not recognizing my hunger cues. I know, and it sucks. And also just keep going.
Yeah, because if you really want to reestablish a relationship with someone that you've ghosted, it's going to take some extra work. And that's okay. And it's normal and understandable for them to be a little wary. And your body is very wary when you've put it through starvation, or when it's been through starvation by whatever means.
Yeah.
I love that. It's a great analogy. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever. I feel like this was just flew by and it was a great conversation. Can you tell people where they can find you and learn more about your work?
Sure. You can find me at luuhrich.com, and that's really hard to spell. So it's just LUUHRICH.com. If that's too hard, you can just go to lueats.com and it'll take you to Lu Uhrich. But that's where you can find me. You can find blog posts and you can find other resources, podcasts that I've been on or hosted, and you can find out how to work with me. I have a 10-week program. I have a one-to-one mentorship. And yeah, I'm available just for connection too and conversation.
Amazing. We'll put links to that in the show notes so people can connect with you. And I hope they do because this was wonderful. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Christy.
So that is our show. Thanks again so much to Lu Uhrich for joining us on this episode. And thanks to you for listening to this final interview before our hiatus. Just a reminder that next week's episode is going to be a brief solo episode, and then we'll be on hiatus. But if you want to keep getting free support from me every week to help heal your relationship with food and your body, come sign up for my newsletter, Food Psych Weekly, at christyharrison.com/newsletter. That's christyharrison.com/newsletter. If you've gotten something out of this podcast, please help us reach more people who need to hear the anti-diet message, because the archives are not going anywhere. There's still soon to be 275 episodes to listen to of this show, and I would love to help get the word out and spread the message while we're gone, while we're on hiatus. So share this episode and subscribe to the pod if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. You can see lots of different places to do that at christyharrison.com/subscribe. That's christyharrison.com/subscribe. And I would love it if you'd leave a nice rating and review if you like the podcast to help new listeners discover us as well. To get full show notes from this episode, including all the resources we discussed, plus a full transcript, just go to christyharrison.com/274. That's christyharrison.com/274. And to get the transcript, just scroll down to the bottom of the page and enter your email address. This episode was brought to you by my online course, Intuitive Eating Fundamentals, where I'm going to be continuing to do a monthly podcast Q&A series that I've been doing for 5 years now. So if you want to keep in touch with me in this audio way, that's the best place to do it. If you're ready to make peace with food, break free from diet culture, and reclaim the life it stole from you, learn more and sign up for the course at christyharrison.com/course. That's christyharrison.com/course. A big thanks, as always, to our editor and sound engineer, Mike Lalonde, our community and content associate, Vinci Chue, our administrative assistant, Julianne Watasik, and our transcriptionist, Mycroft Holmes, for helping me out with all the moving parts that go into producing this show every week. Our album art was photographed by Abby Moore Photography and designed by Melissa Alam. Our theme song was written and performed by Carolyn Pennypacker Riggs. And I'm your host and producer, Christy Harrison. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay psyched.